Good morning. Good morning. It is self-validating Friday. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It is self-validation Friday, you guys. Talking about the inner critic. Self-validation Friday. Talking about, I'm sorry. Talking about the inner critic. Are you guys ready for this conversation? Self-validation Friday. We made it to Friday. All the way to Friday. Listen, transforming your inner critic to your inner coach. I'm excited about today's conversation. I hope you stay on for the remainder. If you cannot, please come back because I do think that this conversation is going to be very insightful, very impactful. And we're wrapping up this week's discussion, which is all about accountability, right? Taking into account and how essential it is to us shaping our life. Shape is SHAPE, right? So on the first week, we talked about self-awareness, right? We took the H, we talked about healing. Now we're taking the A, we're talking about accountability. Next week, we're talking about purpose, right? But today we're talking about accountability. Today we're talking about the inner critic, right? We're talking about the inner critic in terms of accountability, you guys, and I'm really excited about this conversation. Good morning, Miss Melissa. Good morning, Miss Melissa. So, awareness versus action. I do need to give this disclaimer. Listen, this session is really designed to help you identify and understand the impact of the inner critic, you guys. But real transformation, it happens when you take intentional action. All right, healing isn't about silencing the inner critic. It's about learning how to challenge and reframe its voice. If you're truly serious about self-validation, be willing to do the inner work, seek the guidance, support, and accountability that really aligns with your growth. Okay, with your growth. Good morning, good morning, good morning. And I want to welcome you back to Life Lessons with Dr. Shiela Little. If you're new here, I am Dr. Shiela Little. Okay, and this life lesson is a part of the Project Life initiative. Project Life is where we turn theory into practice, you guys. So let's take our deep breath. Okay, we've done what we're supposed to do this morning. Did our stretches, journaled. Whatever we really needed to do this morning, we did that. Right. This is our time. Right. This is our time as a community. Right. So let's get together. No pressure. Just our presence in our body. So we feel our feet. We feel our legs. We breathe. Right. We feel our thighs. We feel our butts in the seats. Our bodies in the beds, wherever we're at. Our seats in the car. Okay. Right. We feel that. Our backs, our stomachs. Right. Up our necks. Down our arms. We feel our hands. We feel our face, our lips, our nose, right? We're just getting present in the body, our heads, our brains, right? Activating our nervous system, just getting present and knowing that we are safe. As adults, we are safe, you guys, because we get to decide, right? We are safe. We are safe in these bodies. All right. All right. So this week oh, wait, before we start, right? Drop a word in the chat. Drop a word in the chat and let me know how you're feeling today. I said, you heard me say, like on Tuesday, I felt like it was Thursday, right? It just has been a long week. But I have to say, today is Friday, and I woke up and I absolutely felt like it's Friday. I felt like it's Friday. I'm prepared for the week. My son goes on spring break next week. So that's exciting. Figuring out what we're gonna do for spring break. So yeah, looking forward to this weekend. So Miss Melissa says she's feeling empowered. How are you feeling this morning? How are you feeling this morning? Can we support you in anything? Can we hold a space for anybody for this weekend? Anything like that. And again, if you guys need that, make sure you either DM me, ask the community for that support. That's why we're here. I had a conversation with a close family member the other day, and this is a close family member who was having some health issues, and she's known to be kind of the comedic family member, so she always has like something funny to say or something like that. And we have our like family group, and I'm checking in on her like, hey, how you doing, like she's not responding. And so I just did a personal call to her, like, hey, what's up? And, she answers the phone and she's like, yeah, I really haven't been coming in because I don't have anything good to say. And I'm like, hey, we're family. So we're here to catch it all. You know what I mean? And I think, again, bringing this back to the inner critic, in her mind, she felt like, well, if I don't have nothing good to say about myself, then I'm not going to say anything. And I'm like, no, like, we're here to hold a space for you. Even if it's like, hey, I had to go back to the hospital, my blood pressure up, y'all pray for me. Or, hey, today is a bum day. Hold a space for me. Hey, I'm just not feeling. But she had identified herself as the funny person, and I guess she just didn't feel like being funny. We both got emotional because as a family, we were just taught to love on each other, and I just really just didn't want her to feel like, hey, that anytime you pop in, it's only when you're feeling good, and only when you have a joke to crack, and when you're feeling bad, then we're not here to support you. That's just not the message that we want to give as a family. And so she ended up popping her head in, we ended up giving her support. But I want to ask you guys, like, when I say drop a word in the chat, it's not, I'm doing good or I'm doing bad, or, it's not I'm doing good all the time. It's whatever the word is, or even DM if you don't want to bring it to the community, because we're here to support you in that. I may not can't trust you from this platform and provide you, but you can DM me and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. We can jump on a call, and you can possibly seek out my services, and we can find out a way for you to get the resources to be able to work through or navigate that. Okay. There's always a solution or resource for you in your time of need. Okay. So we can provide that support for you. So when I say drop a word in the chat, it's truly in your most authentic state. Okay. Because we don't have to be, great all the time. It rains on the just and unjust. Listen, it rains sometimes. It's cloudy sometimes. It's rainy sometimes. Okay. So we accept life as it comes. That's what we learn how to do, right? We're learning how to accept life as it comes. All right. So this week, right, we explored the stories that we tell ourselves on Monday, right? The triggers that arise when we're choosing to heal, right? Heal on Tuesdays, and then the obstacles that keep us stuck, you guys, when we're trying to take accountability on Wednesdays, and the patterns that keep us stuck from taking accountability yesterday. And today we're tackling this inner critic, really the loudest voice that's keeping us from self-validating, from really becoming accountable to ourselves and using the resources around us, okay? And having those resources help us to hold ourselves accountable to our dreams, to our goals, and to this one life that we have been given, this great life, this beautiful life, and this amazing life that we have been given. Okay, so if you've ever doubted yourself or struggled with negative self-talk, right, and felt like you wasn't good enough, or really just don't know how to manage it, and I would even say, if you're trying to run away from it or stop it or in some type of way, then I'm gonna say this session is for you, you guys. Individuals who really struggling with self-doubt, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, those who find themselves stuck seeking external validation instead of really trusting themselves. And then people who really struggle with this inner critic and really don't know how to shift this voice when it comes to interfering with, putting these accountability systems in place. And then I would just say those faith-based individuals who really want to move from this learned helplessness. And when I say learned helplessness, I do feel like when we talk about the faith-based community, either God's going to do it or the devil's doing it to me, right? So that's a learned helplessness. Like, I don't have any control over my life. Either God is doing this to me or for me, or the devil is doing this to me. You know what I mean? And that's kind of a learned helplessness. And I'm saying, hey, you know what? You have a role in your life, and let's take your power back, because God placed something in you. Okay. God placed something in you, and let's activate that so we can be back in relationship with God, back in relationship with our bodies, back in relationship with our spirit, so we can, live in our purpose, live in our fullness, and things like that. Okay. All right. If that makes sense, put a heart in the chat for me. All right. So accountability, our powerful quote for today is that accountability is the glue that ties commitment to results, you guys. And the voice in our head is either the coach or the critic. All right. So accountability is the glue that ties commitment to results. And the voice in our heads, right, is either the coach or the critic. All right. So let's go back to Lisa. Lisa was this ambitious, was ambitious, or is ambitious and hardworking. But But no matter how much she accomplishes, you guys, she always feels like she's falling short. Her inner critic consistently tells her, you could have done better. You're not as good as them. And why even try? You'll just fail, right? How many of us have that? No matter how much we accomplish, no matter how much we do, there's just this unsettling voice in our head that's just telling us, like, you could have done better with that. You're not good as them, right? Why even try to do this thing? If you feel familiar to Lisa's story, maybe you should like stay a little longer, okay? Even when people praise her, even when she would get the praise or the promotion or whatever, she doesn't believe it, you guys. Lisa doesn't realize that her biggest obstacle isn't her lack of ability. It's her inability to really validate herself, right? Her story connects back to the lessons from this week, right? So the stories we tell ourselves, she believed that she has to be perfect to be worthy, right? That any form of criticism, again, triggers these feelings of shame and failure. That's the trigger, right? And then the obstacle is her fear of not being good enough holds her back from her opportunities. So Lisa realized that this inner critic really was this learned voice that she could now rewrite when she put the right accountability systems in place, right? And what is that accountability system, right? It's getting a coach, right? Journaling about it, right? Reading the books that she needs to read, going into prayer or building that relationship with God, right? Because Lisa can't do it on her own. So she need a system in place to really get out of her head, right? And start to do the work. Okay. So if you've ever noticed self-doubt and like imposter syndrome, or noticing yourself procrastinate and said that you wanted to change it, two things I want you to ask yourself. Where did this start? Right? When did I try to fix it? And then what happened? Why didn't I fix that? Right. And I can guarantee you that when you started to fix that, because we've all started like, oh, I think I should go to therapy. I need to get some help on this, but we didn't follow through. And a big part of us not following through is because ultimately we don't have the right systems in place to hold us accountable to do the thing that we say we're going to do. Listen, the inner critic isn't the real you guys. And you're going to hear me say this week after week. It's not the real you. It's a conditioned voice based on old fears, old stories, and old programs. Okay. This means that you don't have to believe everything it says. You can retrain it. Imagine finally being free from self-doubt and trusting yourself completely, right? What if self-validation is the missing piece in your confidence, right? I once worked with someone who never felt good enough. Once she recognized her inner critic was repeating her childhood fears, she really learned how to reframe these thoughts. And now now she validates herself instead of seeking approval from others. How was she able to do this? By this thing called neuroplasticity, right? Because studies show that neuroplasticity can help her rewire her thoughts, right? Her negative thought patterns. How does neuroplasticity work though, right? By doing things over and over again. First, we make our habits, then our habits make us. How do we do things over and over again? A system, right? Putting systems in place. Lisa met with me every week, right? She did her homework assignments. She started to speak up for herself. She became self aware. She started to put things in place so that she can notice her behaviors, right? So she started to change things. And as she started to change things, she started to what? Build new neurons, right? This neuroplasticity started to happen. All right. And then she started to notice that how she spoke to herself, not that the negative conversation stopped in her head, but how she responded to them started to shift. And it's interesting because we would be in um mid deep in a conversation and she would say something and then she would just reframe it right there in the session, like, my head is telling me this, but I know this, right? So this self-awareness started to happen. Why? Because practice makes progress, you guys. So the more she practiced, the more she met with me, the more she started to believe and change her narrative, the more neuroplasticity started to work for her good. All right. And so this is the power of having accountability, because the accountability, like we talked about yesterday, her intention was to change, right? She had these old patterns, and the accountability became the glue that she used to truly help her. One of the things that's in my program is that, we have the app, and so it's on your phone, right? And one of the things that I do with people is that I send out like gratitude statements every day. Like, you get this weekly prompt that you can do every day, but it's something that's coming out to you that's keeping you reminded. That's in more of the high level programs when people work with me. But this is, I'm making it so that, listen, we're rewiring your brain, right? We have a message board. You can talk to me anytime, right? We do voice notes. All of that is helping with this neuroplasticity and really helping you to be held accountable so that these changes can happen. All right. So, are you ready to shift your inner dialogue? I really want you to ask yourself that question. Am I ready to shift my inner dialogue? And if you are, listen, drop a light bulb in the chat for me, right? Drop a like bulb in the chat for me. So we know that the stopping out framework, the I, is for inner critic, right? It's for inner critic, the voice that really shapes how we see ourselves, right? And often limits our healing, you guys. I have to say that. The voice that shapes how we see ourselves and often limits our inner healing, okay? Why the inner critic exists? The brain created this inner critic, and you've heard me say this before, to really keep us safe from rejection, right, and failure. It really is a defense mechanism, you guys, right? So the brain, we can train the brain, right, to rewire it, right? So we can rewire the brain to really shift this criticism into self-compassion. All right. So the relationship that self-talk has with the inner critic is that, here's self-talk. Self-talk is that ongoing conversation that you're having right now, right? That ongoing conversation you have with yourself that's shaping your beliefs, right? Your confidence and your behaviors. So we have that, okay? Like I said, as I'm talking to you, there could be a voice that's talking to you about what I'm saying. It's either agreeing with what I'm saying, it's saying, hey, that's interesting. Yep, I know what you're talking about, right? It's either confirming or denying what I'm saying, right? Which is creating a response in your body. So either you're tensing up, a smile is coming on your face, right? You're having some type of physical reaction, right, to this self-talk in your head. All right. This is normal. This is normal. Okay. Then we have the inner critic. Okay. The inner critic is the negative voice, right? That highlights the fears, the doubts, and the failures, often sabotaging our progress. So what is that? So as I'm talking to myself, right? And I get a response in my body, my nervous system gets responded. When I go into, so just say I say something and it triggers survival brain, or it triggers some angst. That trigger could trigger your inner critic, can trigger these fears, these doubts, and these failures. And now the inner critic now may take over. So now it's not self-talk anymore. Now you're listening, right? Because that inner critic was actually you in dialogue with me in your head, though. Yep, that's right. Yep, that's right. It was like you were actually having a conversation with me. I just wasn't hearing that conversation. Then the inner critic stepped in because something you said may have triggered a nervous response. And so now you're listening to the inner critic. You're not listening to me anymore. You hear me, you hear my voice, but this inner critic is like, yeah, you never follow through with anything. Yep, you remember that one time you did this and you failed at that. And yep, I don't know. Can you even afford her? Like the inner critic has now taken over the conversation. So you hearing me talk, but this inner critic may be a little louder. If that makes sense, put a 2 in the chat. Or maybe this happens, when you're talking to your spouse or when you're talking to your friends, or maybe you see a Facebook post, right? So I want you to see the difference between the self-talk, which is kind of like you having a conversation with yourself, but it's like you're having a conversation with the other person. You're in manual, but it's in your head, versus you listening in your head to this voice that's telling you about you. Okay. Here's where accountability plays a role. Accountability is the ability to take responsibility for your actions and follow through with your commitments. So I'm accountable for which side I'm listening to. So when that inner critic starts to, when I find myself in listening mode and this inner critic starts to say stuff like, yeah, you never did this, I can respond. I can go back into self talk, right? I can say, oh, no, that's not true, right? That's not how that happened. Or, I'm not a failure. I'm learning, right? I can step back into self talk, and then I can reframe what I'm listening to this inner critic say. And that now is me taking back responsibility of the present moment and being accountable. So that's what the internal accountability look like. What does that look like on the outside of me? Now that I find out that this is happening, but it's getting overwhelming, and I find myself stuck in this cycle, now I may go get a therapist. I may go get a coach. I may realize that something needs to change. I may find out that I need to, like I said, lose weight or change my diet or something, some pattern is happening in my head. So now I'm going to put these systems, right, these accountability systems outside of me to help make those shifts. And the biggest accountability is to the purpose of my life, right? So I'm feeling like, my life really has no purpose or, meaning or value. I'm going to get connected to a higher source. Like, who is God? What is God? And what is my purpose for my life? Okay. So here's the connection between self-talk, inner critic, and accountability. Listen, self-talk and the inner critic can either support accountability or destroy it. Okay. If your inner dialogue is negative, self-sabotage, or fear-driven, right? It keeps you from taking responsibility. It keeps you from taking responsibility. Okay. So, how negative self-talk really determines our accountability? Listen, excuses and justification, right? I'm just not good at this. That is the thing that we'll say. And when we say that, it will lead to avoidance, you guys. Does that make sense? So if my negative self-talk or this inner critic says, I'm just not good. If it starts to make excuses and justify, and it says stuff like, I'm just not good at this, it will lead to avoidance. All right. If I'm focused on like procrastination and fear of failure, it may sound something like, if I can't do this perfectly, then I won't do it at all, which will lead to procrastination. All right. If it's around self-doubt or imposter syndrome, I may have questions that come up like, maybe they're going to figure out I really don't know what I'm doing. Who am I to think that I can succeed? Do I really deserve that much money? Am I really experienced enough to do that? Which will lead to you quitting before you even start, you guys. Playing the victim, okay? When we play the victim, you guys, it's often this, it's not my fault, so I don't need to change, right? They're the ones that did this. They're the ones that said it, right? So when we play the victim, we don't take any responsibility. So again, it's not my fault. So, and that's coming up in your head, like, it's not my fault. So I don't know what's going to happen because I don't need to change. I don't need to do nothing, right? This leads to blame shifting, you guys. And then again, the over criticism, right? Which is, I always mess up. I always mess things up, I'm always the scapegoat. People always blaming me, right? Which leads to self-sabotage or inaction, you guys. Listen, I want you to think about what kind of self-talk or negative self-talk, which is that inner critic, do you have when break commitments with yourself, or when you say you're going to do something and you don't have that accountability in place and you don't do it. The first thing to change is self-awareness. And if we don't realize the things that we say to ourselves, then it's very hard to catch it and rewrite it. Right. So what things do you say when you make a commitment and then you don't follow through? What is those things that come up for you? And then just start to become aware of it. We're not going to judge it. We just want to become aware, because those things may be the patterns that we need to stop and reframe. Okay. All right. If that makes sense, put a 1 in the chat for me. All right. Listen, this is how I want you to know how shame and guilt, because I showed you guys this frequency thing in my Elevated Life show, where it's called the emotional scales, right? And it talked about like shame and guilt, which is very low vibrating emotions, right? And when we have guilt, right, it's like, I made a mistake, right? I made a mistake. And sometimes this I made a mistake, we can respond to that in a healthy way, right? And and when we respond to that in a healthy way, it can lead to correction, you guys. It can lead to correction. It's like I'm guilty about that. And I want you to know the difference between guilt and shame. So guilt is like, um, I did something that was against what I valued. I wouldn't do that, but I did it and I feel guilty for that, right? And I can course correct. All right. Shame is more of an identity thing, right? So I am a mistake, right? I am a mistake, and that's very unhealthy because that leads to avoidance. Can y'all see the difference in that? So guilt is like, I don't lie, right? I don't I value the truth, and maybe I lied. Maybe I lied. And when I lied, I felt bad about that. I felt a little guilty about that, right? So I made a mistake and I lied, so I'm going to course correct and come back around and tell the truth. Okay. Like I made a mistake. I did that. Shame would take that lie and be like, I am a mistake, right? And it will lead to like this avoidance and this like, why am I just such a liar? And it will come in and it will snatch your identity from you. So we really need to understand like even the difference in our emotions. And how do we do that? We do that by seeking out help. That's the accountability piece. Once we can identify like the emotion that we're in. Am I suffering from shame? Good morning. Good morning, Miss Jackie. Um, Once we can identify the emotion we're in, is it like a shame? Is it like a guilt? Is it perfectionism? Is it overanalyzing? Like, what is this? Or I'm feeling that emotion and I don't know what this emotion is, right? Then we can go seek out the help that we need. And then let me put the accountability piece in place so that I can follow through and get the answer to the question. That is the piece of it, right? A lot of times we're not getting the solutions and the resolutions that we're looking for because we don't have the system in place that really can yield the result that we're looking for. And then we will blame the people. Yeah, I went to therapy, but it just didn't work. Well, did you follow through? Or maybe did you have a system to even find the right therapist? So a lot of times that is on your account to find the right therapist, to do the discovery work, right? To do the homework assignments and to really like go through this emotion that that is necessary for you to experience your life, because your life is worth it, you guys. Listen, I want you to know how this inner critic shows up in your life. Again, it just shows up in perfectionism, right? It shows up in over apologizing. Again, it shows up in fear of failure. It shows up in seeking external validation, and it shows up in this comparison trap, you guys. Okay, so I want you to know though that there is this self-talk that can strengthen us. Okay. When we have positive self-talk, we can take ownership. We can take ownership of things. And that ownership can create what's called a growth mindset. All right. So I didn't follow through today, but I can adjust and do better tomorrow. That's positive self-talk, right? Which leads to what? Self-correction. There is something called resilience and adaptability. That's very different than being strong, because a lot of us are trying to be strong, which can be a lot more ego based than resilient and adaptable, right? I made a mistake, but I can learn from this. That leads to persistence, right? But being strong is like, I have to do everything right. I got to carry the burden. I got to carry the load and all of that. But we can be resilient and adaptable, you guys. Self-compassion. I'm growing, and growth takes time, you guys. This leads to consistency. This leads to consistency. Um, what came up in my spirit earlier when I was reviewing what I wanted to say today was, if you was planting a tomato tree or a tomato plant and you went out and you were hungry and you noticed that the tomato plant was not ripe, you wouldn't just dig up the tomato plant. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm hungry, it's not ripe, let me just dig it up. You would have an understanding that it's not right because it's not time to harvest it. You know what I mean? You wouldn't judge it harshly. And this is where self-compassion comes in. A lot of us, we want something from ourselves, but we don't give ourselves the same compassion that we will give that tomato plant, or that we will give that flower that hasn't blossomed yet, or that we will give that apple tree that hasn't bear fruit yet, or that we will give the tree that hasn't given its leaves yet, right? And we too are in our gestational period, which means that we have blossoming times. But when we can't get that thing when we're ready to give it, then it's like we just want to give up. We just want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And it's like, no, you're growing, and growth takes time. That doesn't mean that you will never ripen to that point, that thing can never come out of you. Just keep watering it. Just keep doing the work, and you will yield the thing that you desire. Okay? And then a commitment to learning, you guys. I may not have all the answers, but I'm committed to figuring it out. This is positive self-talk, you guys, because life is going to life with you for the rest of your life. And if we don't change the way we speak to ourselves, you guys, and really change it to, I may not have all the answers today, but I'm going to figure it out. Just something as simple as that will lead to the actions that we need. Miss Jackie said, keep watering is key. Yes, Miss Jackie, we have to keep watering ourselves, but a lot of us, we're pulling up the roots, we're before it can even, take any roots, we're like on to the next thing, right? Because we're being impatient, because we're allowing this inner critic in our minds to affect our progress, you guys. And remember, it is about progress, not perfection. Life is about progress, not perfection. And then we get to a level of mastery. And like I said yesterday, even in mastery, there's error, you guys. Here's some additional factors that I want you guys to know that really influence self-talk and accountability, right? Your inner critic is rooted in past experiences. This is huge because I think this is something that we can take accountability for, and we can start giving compassion to ourselves about, because a lot of us are trying to run from our past, and we have to embrace our past as a part of who we are today, and then create a plan for who we want to become. Miss Jackie said it's not always easy, Miss Sheila. It is not always easy, Miss Jackie. But that's why we seek out the help and support, because it's not easy. In this life, Miss Jackie, is not meant to live alone, right? And sometimes, going back to what I'm about to say, sometimes because our past has been, so brutal, so harsh to us, and we've judged it so harshly, we feel like we can't share ourselves, or we've created walls in our heads, and so we're keeping people out. And we're adults now, and I just have to keep reminding us, as adults, we're safe. I was having a conversation with a lady yesterday, and and I asked them, like, it's all about your belief systems. It's all about your belief systems. And I'm like, do you believe you will succeed? And she's like, yes. And I'm like, do you believe you will be financially, stable? She's like, yes. I said, do you believe you're safe? And she said, no. And I said, until you can believe that you're safe, no amount of money, no relationship, nothing is going to fix that, right? That is an internal thing that you're going to have to fix. And here's the thing, a lot of us don't feel safe in our adultness. Okay? We don't feel safe in our adultness. Okay? And here's what happens. We end up then attracting unsafe environments, unsafe jobs, right? Things that appear unsafe, because we ultimately still get to choose to leave, to go, but these things appear unsafe. And so we will start to do things, though, to create safety within those structures. So then we will shut down, right? I'm not talking to you. I'm going to get in this relationship. I feel unsafe in this relationship, so I'm not going to talk about me, and I'm not going to be vulnerable because I don't feel safe. but I've committed to the relationship. Well, a relationship is not a place to get not a thing that you get into to not open up and be vulnerable, to not have some level of interdependence. All right. But because I feel unsafe, then I'm not going to be vulnerable. But now I'm attracting, a mate that I may not feel safe with. So I'm just perpetuating this unsafetyness. Does that make sense? If that makes sense, put a 2 in the chat. Or I may getting a job, and I may be very creative, but I'm not expressing my creativity because of fear of somebody's going to take ownership for that or steal my creative ability. Or I see that I say something and my boss takes credit for it. So I feel unsafe in speaking my truth because I'm being penalized for it, right? So this unsafetyness is being mimicked, right, in my environment, when truly I just feel unsafe on the inside because I grew up in an environment where I was unsafe. We need to heal that. We need to heal that feeling of unsafety. And remember, the first environment we live in is our emotional environment, you guys. And we're going to talk about it more when we get to the biblical wisdom, is this heart posture, right? It's our heart posture. We really have to become back in relationship with our heart posture. And then we need to get back in relationship with our creator, right? As adults, we are in relationship with something that's greater than us, right? That's greater than our mother and our father could have ever been. It's the creator of all things. And then we lean to that creator, right? And then we lean to that word because that word cannot lie. And we lean to that truth. Like I told you about gravity. Gravity says, if I drop this, right, it's going to fall. But I can't trust that in my heart posture, right? If I'm feeling unsafe, I can't trust the word of God because that is where my truth comes from. Okay. Let's talk about that a little more. So your inner critic, we'll talk about that a little more when we get to the biblical wisdom. Okay. Listen, your inner critic is rooted in past experiences. This is what I want you to know. So your inner critic is not random, you guys. It's developed based on childhood messages, social expectations, past failures, and fear of rejection. All right. All right. And that makes it difficult today, right? That makes life difficult today because we could have had some childhood messages, some social societal expectations, some past failures, and some rejections that were real back then, right? And if you were consistently criticized growing up, you may have internalized that voice today. Okay. Here's the solution. Recognize where the inner critic comes from, right? Recognize where your inner critic comes from really helps you to separate your past conditions from your present truth. Listen, when it say the truth will set you free, you guys, this is the truth will set you free. And that truth is, I'm no longer that child anymore. I am a full, now this is Shiela speaking. I'm a full 47-year-old woman, new cells, new skin, new everything. I'm no longer that child. Those are memories that are triggering, right? This system, my nervous system, right? I have these neuropeptides in my body, and if when I can understand that, right? And when I can understand how my body works, remember the Bible said, my people perish for the lack of knowledge. Because I don't have an understanding of what's going on, is as if this is one big thing happening and I'm feeling like I'm this little kid anymore and you're not. And I'm functioning like I'm this little kid anymore and you're not. Right? And this ego will play a part in this, right? So because the ego really resists accountability because it sees it as a threat. Because if I take accountability and I stand in who I am today and I get in manual, listen, the ego is really wired for self-protection. And that's not a bad thing. Again, it's the defense mechanism, right? It doesn't like to admit fault, you guys. It doesn't like to be challenged, right? Or it doesn't like to face discomfort, right? So this is why people deflect blame, right? Justify inaction. overanalyzed instead of acting, right? Instead of seeing accountability as attack, we need to see it as a tool for growth. And if I know that the ego is there as a self-protection, I can have compassion for it and say, thank you, but I need to move. I need action. I have a plan in place. Mondays I do this, Tuesdays I do this, Wednesdays I do this, right? Because I have a plan of action that for a growth of this. So again, we go back to what is it that you want and what plan are we going to put in place? And then what's going to hold us accountable to that plan? Going to school, we get a plan. You're going to go to school. And I always say this, if you started college right now, you know that you're not going to get that degree until 3 or 4 years from now. And a lot of us are okay with that. Why? Because there's a plan. You're going to take psychology 101. You're going to take this. You're going to take this. I know that that's for 16 weeks. This is my homework assignments, right? And then I know 4 years from now, if I keep on this plan, I'm going to be a bachelor's in this or that, right? But it's a plan. And it's something about that plan that makes us say, okay, I'll pay $50,000 for that. I'll pay $100,000 for that. I'll pay $200,000, depending on what college you go to. I'll pay $200,000 for that plan. If it guarantees, in 4 years I'll have that, right? Because the plan is it's backdooring the ego, right? And what if we said that about our own life? Okay, in 4 years, this is what I want my life to look like, and I'm going to create a plan, right? And on Mondays, I'm going to do this for 4 hours. And on Tuesdays, I'm going to do this for 3 hours. And then I'm going to take off Wednesdays. And then on Thursdays, I'm going to do this for 2 hours. And then on Fridays, I'm going to do this and that's going to be my plan. And in 4 years, that's going to be my harvest. And I'm going to call that harvest a master of whatever your name is. I'm going to create a certificate for that, right? And then I'm going to graduate. I'm going to create a graduation day, and I'm going to invite all my friends and family because I just graduated from my life because I just, made this degree program for myself. What if we did that? And that degree is going to be worth, it's going to have on it invaluable, right? Because my life is invaluable. Or it could be worth $1 million. Whatever the value you want to be. What if you did something like that? Right? Because that's going to ensure the ego that, okay, that's safe because we know what we're going to do. But a lot of the things that we're going into, you guys, accountability, because we don't have the system in place, the ego is wired for self-protection. So it doesn't know. So it's going to what? We don't rise to our goals. We fall to our systems. And if we ain't giving our ego a system, if we ain't giving our life a system, if we ain't giving our brains a system, it's like, okay, I am scared. What is about to happen? So we just need a plan. Okay. If that makes sense, put a 3 in the chat. All right. And then there's this thing called cognitive dissonance, right? Cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is the mental discomfort that happens when actions don't align with our values, you guys. So you say you value discipline, right? But you keep breaking your promises to yourself. This creates internal tension, you guys. I say I want to work out. I say I want to do this thing, but I never really work out, and I keep eating unhealthy. That's creating tension within the body because guess what? Your mind is taking inventory of everything that you're doing, and that cognitive dissonance that you're feeling is creating some type of pattern within your nervous system. All right. I'm not saying this so you can feel bad about yourself. Again, my people perish because of lack of knowledge. So now that I know, right, that I'm creating cognitive dissonance, what I'm going to do about it? So instead of ignoring this discomfort that I'm feeling about saying one thing and then doing another, right, use motivation to change your pattern, right? Use desire, right, to move forward, right? Use your resources to make the transformations that you desperately seek in your life. All right? All right. Does that make sense? All right. If that makes sense, put it 2 in the chat. Listen, self-validation is the key to true long-term accountability, you guys. Self-validation is the key to long-term accountability, you guys. Good morning, Miss Jermaine. Good morning, Tiana. Good morning, Pep. Okay, self-validation is the key to long-term accountability. If your self-worth depends on external validation, you guys, if your self-worth depends on external validation, you will struggle to stay accountable. Listen, true accountability happens when you validate your own progress, even when no one is watching. True accountability happens, you guys, when you're validating your own progress, even when no one is watching. Listen, shift from I need others to hold me accountable to really I trust myself to follow through. Listen, I trust myself to follow through and do what I need to do. I trust myself to know what I need to know. We have mom Jermaine, Mom Foley. But that was my financial coach. Mom Foley she works with women um with their finances, right? I I didn't need, quote unquote, Jermaine to hold me accountable. I knew that, right? I trusted myself to know that, hey, there's a gap between me and my relationship with finance, right? Right. And then I went to her with that, right? And she held a space for that gap with me, right? That's the shift, right? And a lot of us, and then what that did is that took the shame out of me. That took away shame, right? But when I'm saying I don't need people to hold me accountable, like, no, you don't need people to hold you accountable. You can trust your own gap. You can trust what you know about you, and then you can go give that to somebody so that they can hold the space for you in that. Does that make sense? Put a 4 in the chat if that makes sense. Listen, your inner critic is learned. So it can be unlearned, you guys. Your ego fights accountability, but accountability really leads to freedom, you guys. Cognitive dissonance can either um, help you, um, accountability. I'm sorry. Cognitive dissonance can either keep you stuck or push you to grow, you guys. And self-validation is the foundation of consistency and accountability. Okay. Okay. So we're going into our biblical wisdom, you guys. We're going into our biblical wisdom. I'm so excited about this biblical wisdom because, I'm always reinventing the verse. I don't think I'm reinventing verses, you guys. What I do is I read a verse and I'm like, okay, God, what does that mean for me? Okay. And what does that mean for this community? And then how can I make that applicable? Okay. Because again, I believe that the Bible is a book of promises, parables, prophecies and patterns, right? And when I heard that, I was just like, that is just so phenomenal, right? And so when I'm reading it and I'm trying to make it practical, like what's the practicality of this? So Proverbs 23:6, you guys, listen, Proverbs 23:6 said, do not eat the food of a begrudging host. Do not crave his delicacies, for he is the kind of person who is always thinking about the cost. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you. You will vomit up the little you have eaten and will have wasted your compliments. Jermaine said, I love your mustard seed interpretation. Thank you, Mom Foley. Listen, Proverbs 23:6 and 8. Do not eat. Now, what we understand this verse to be is 23:7, which is, for as a man thinketh out his heart, so is he. That is this verse, right? For as a man thinketh out his heart, so is he. But that verse, King James version say, for as a man thinketh of his heart, so is he. Eat and drink, says he, but his heart is not with thee, right? The NIV version says, do not eat the food of the begrudging host. Do not crave his delicacies, for he is the kind of person who is always thinking about the cost. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you, you guys. You will vomit up the little you have eaten and will have wasted your compliment. Why did I put this as the principal verse today? Listen, the verse originally warns us about, deceptive hospitality, right? Someone may offer you something outwardly, but inwardly, right, their motives don't match their actions, right? It warns us not to engage with people who external presentation doesn't align with their internal truth, right? So don't take from a miser, because it leaves you feeling unsettled and empty on the inside. Okay. That was the interpretation of this verse. But when we dig a little deeper, you guys, this passage really becomes a little even more powerful, right? It becomes even more powerful when we apply it inwardly. Okay. Your inner critic offers you support on the surface. You should do this. Just fix that, right? But internally holds back beliefs, love, and grace for you. Okay? You're trying to heal and grow, but your internal voice doesn't fully support you, you guys. It's focused on what it's costing you and what you're not doing, right? The result is like self-sabotage. You reject your own progress, and even small wins feel meaningless and fake, right? Just like a guest who ends up vomiting his food. Does that make sense? Right? So this passage is often read as a warning to others, but when applied inwardly, it becomes a revelation of how we treat ourselves. How we treat ourselves, you guys. If your self-talk says, I love myself, but your heart still holds shame, criticism, and unworthiness, right? You become the begrudging host of your own souls, right? You're offering yourself affirmations with one hand, but withholding love and forgiveness with the other. Listen, your internal voice says you're doing great, but underneath, you don't even believe it. You're just like the begrudging host. You're offering yourself grace with one hand, and on the other, you're telling yourself you're not enough, right? So this verse is really teaching us that we must be wholehearted in our self-talk, you guys. Self-validation only works if it's authentic, not conditional. If your actions and your inner beliefs are misaligned, you guys, your growth will feel empty, even performative. All right. So when we often say positive things in our minds, like I forgive myself, you know, I'm beautiful, I'm wonderfully made. And remember when I say those affirmations, like if you don't believe it, it's not going to work, right? Like when I give the affirmation, I'm saying I'm giving it for language, but it's our heart posture that we have to change, because as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, right? This is what that verse is saying, right? So we often say positive things in our minds, right? Are in our self-talk, but that inner critic will come and rob that in a minute, right? So that inner critic becomes a host that gives empty compliments while keeping score, you guys. And just like the guest who ends up feeling sick, we end up rejecting our own growth because we don't trust it, right? True self-validation comes when your head and heart is aligned, you guys, when your inner voice becomes a friend to you, you guys, and not this kind of fake supporter. Okay? Listen, sometimes we can say something in our heads, you guys, but we haven't truly healed our hearts. We haven't healed our hearts, right? The disconnect between our intention and our embodiment. This is a disconnect between our intentions and our embodiment. Listen, the mind might know the right thing to say. I forgive you. I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing this in my mind, in my head, but the heart hasn't healed. Your heart hasn't healed, and it's still carrying guilt, you guys. It's still carrying shame. It's still carrying fears and judgments that I talked about earlier from your past. Then when that happens, those words, they feel hollow. When I'm saying I love myself and I feel enough and I can do all of this stuff, right? And I'm not seeing the growth, and I can't stay patient. And when I talk about, you know, I'm pulling up the roots. The reason I'm impatient and I'm pulling up the roots is because I really haven't healed it in my heart, and my mind is growing weary because I can't keep telling myself something that I really don't believe. I believe when I plant that seed out there, And I'm seeing that tomato. I know I planted that seed. I know that tomato is not ripe. And so I can be patient with it, you know. But when I'm telling myself that I am enough, but I haven't healed my heart, right? I don't believe that that's going to shift and change for me. And that's why you need the accountability, because that is the glue that's going to help you to like help that story to start to grow and flourish, even in your unbelief. But if you don't have accountability in place, then you become the begrudging host to yourself, right? You become like the like almost like the flattery friend. You're saying stuff that you don't believe. And creates that emotional dissonance, right? This creates the self-sabotage. This creates our inability to receive love, right? Or accountability, right? To truly live the life that we want to live. All right. To be a friend to ourselves, you guys, it has to come from our hearts. To be a friend to ourselves, it has to come from our hearts. Listen, the ego definitely acts like the begrudging host, right? It is the thing that's saying, sure, let's try it, right? But don't you mess up. Sure, let's go there. Let's take the leap. But you know, right? It's sometimes setting you up, right? But true self-compassion comes from the spirit within, which is what? Love, grace, right? From a heart that's been softened because it's healed and it's healing. Like without that alignment, you guys, people are consistently trying to heal from a place that feels cold, transactional, and performative. All right. All right. If that makes sense, put a 5 in the chat for me. If you heard that, put a 5 in the chat for me. Listen, this is ego-based talk. I should be better. I should be better. I should be doing more, right? This is a healed self-talk. I'm proud of how far I've come. I'm proud of myself. Okay? Ego-based talk. Why can't I just get it right? Why can't I just figure this out? Right? Healed self-talk. I'm okay to grow at my own pace. You know, that's why I really do love the slogan layout. Listen, we got to learn to live at our own pace, you guys. We really do got to learn how to live at our own pace. Okay. Ego based self talk. I guess I'll forgive myself, but I still hate that I messed up. You know, I guess I can get past that, but you know, I don't know, I'm still going to feel something about that. Right? That's very egoic. Listen, heal based talk. I forgive myself fully and choose to learn from this. Okay. A lot of the stuff that we're doing is in our heads. It's in our heads, right? And we haven't moved to our hearts because again, we really don't feel safe. And I want to remind you today, as the adult you are today, you are safe to feel those emotions. Nothing is going to happen to you. You may cry, you may, but God has given you a mechanism. Breathe. You safe. Breathe through that. Let it come up and let it come out, right? Only to come up and come out again and to come up and come out again. It's not going to break you. But we got to start feeling this part again so that we can start what? Cultivating the seeds and activating this part of us so that we can what? Become confident so that we can what? Start to speak our truths and start to live in what? Our divinity. Because what is our divinity? Our ability to what? Transcend our limitations. And our thoughts can only take us so far. Right? It only can take us so far. And guess what? That inner critic, it's like by design, it understands that like the heart, as long as the heart cut off, like, yep, I can jump in. I'm like double dutch. I hear the words you saying and I can kind of jump in and I can hold this past against you because I know that is still here in your heart. But when you can let go of your past, then you can master this inner critic. when we can do something with this emotion, when we can set it to the side and allow ourselves to feel it and become a part of who we are, and not try to hold a wall against it, and and not forgive, and and hold down to it and feel like that's going to make us strong. No, we can become resilient in that emotion. All right. So we can't truly hold ourselves accountable until love, hold our accountable with ourselves accountable with love, until we stop being the begrudging host to ourselves, you guys. Until our heart and our head are aligned, we'll keep offering ourselves support that we don't truly believe. Okay. All right. And that's where healing gets stuck. Okay. All right. So your inner critic must be aligned with true intentions. If you say you want to heal and grow, but your inner critic is counting the cost, doubting your worth, and keeping score, you'll sabotage your progress, right? Accountability without compassion is just punishment. All right. All right. All right. Does that make sense? Put a 6 in the chat for me. All right. And so our promise verse, which ties back to this principle verse, because that was a lot to unpack. All right. Listening. Philippians 1:6. Be confident of this. Have it all figured out. Okay, there we go. You were not meant to have it all figured out today. All right. The process of healing, rewriting your narrative, and learning to validate yourself is a good work, you guys. And God is committed to seeing it through. Right? You do not need to be perfect to be worthy. You are a work in progress. Okay? You are a work in progress. And that is holy too. All right. And that is holy too. Okay. That go off. And that is holy too. I don't know if this went off or not. All right. So what this means is that I just want to make sure that my camera didn't go out. Give me a second. Yeah, it went out. It went out. It went out. So, but I'm still here, so I'm gonna finish this. All right. So our promise verse, being confident of this, that he who began the good work in you will continue it on to completion until the day of Christ. What this means is that you're not meant to have it all figured out today, you guys. The process of healing, rewriting your narrative, and learning to validate yourself is a good work, right? And God is committed to seeing it through. You don't need to be perfect to be worthy, you guys. You are a work in progress, and that is holy too. Okay. Most of us battle this inner critic because we believe we have to be perfect ourselves in order to be worthy. We assume if we make a mistake, fall behind, or feel stuck, we fail the process, you guys. But this verse is a promise, not from this distant God from the sky, but the God, you guys, who dwells in you, who started the work within you and is committed to carry it through. Listen, he who began the good work in you, that work started inside of you, not outside of you. This includes your desires to heal, your desires to grow, shifting your mindset, and quieting this inner critic. If that makes sense, put a heart in the chat for me. If I'm back, one, put a 2 in the chat for me if you can hear me. Because Miss Jackie said the screen froze. Okay. Okay. All right. So the work started inside of you, not outside of you. Okay. So this includes your desires to heal, grow, shift your mindset, and quiet the critic, right? So the fact that you're in this session today means that the work has begun, right? The fact that you're seeking support means that the work has begun. All right. Listen, we'll carry it to completion. What does that mean? You are not expected to finish this race alone, you guys. The inner critic says you're behind, you're not enough, you'll never finish. But listen, but the spirit says, I got you. Let's keep going. I'm not done with you yet. Right? And we have to believe that. We have to believe that. All right. We often think that our personal growth depends only on us, you guys, our motivation, our perfection, and our consistency. But this verse, listen, it reminds us that the divine lives within us, not outside of us. And your healing is a shared process, okay? So you don't have to be fully healed to be fully loved. You don't have to you don't have to fix every flaw, right? Every flaw to to be used for your purpose, and you can trust the process even when you don't feel ready enough, you guys. Okay. The power of this promise is that this scripture beautifully counters the inner critic. While the critic focuses on our flaws, on our failures, and on our unfinished parts, listen, this verse centers on faith, on grace, and on our divine continuity, right? Even when your self-talk, right, falters, the work within you does not. Even when our self-talk falters, the work in us does not. Okay. All right. All right. So listen, here is our transformational tools. Here's our transformational tools. I want you to recognize your negative patterns. All right. What is my inner critic telling me? Is it helping me, or is it hurting me? I really want you to reframe that dialogue. Okay. What's a more supportive way that I can be supportive of myself? All right. And then I want you to align the words with the actions. All right. How can I make my self talk match my commitment to accountability? All right. I want you to think about it like this. Here's your challenge in this. I want you to think about your inner critic, and because today's title is how to change your inner critic to your coach, right? To your inner coach. So if you once speak to a friend the way your inner critic speaks to you, right? Then don't speak to you like that, right? So the challenge for today is for the next 24 hours, when you catch your inner critic speaking to you in a way that is not compassionate, right? Be your own best friend, right? So speak to yourself in love. Okay. All right. The affirmation for today is I am not my inner critic. I am healing. I am my healing. I validate myself. I trust myself, and I am more than enough. And I am more than enough. And our intention for today, I have to bring it over. Our intention for today is I'm getting our attention. So our challenge for today is for the next 24 hours, practice self-validation, right? Listening to that voice in your head and doing the thing that you're supposed to do. I'm just so sorry because, when my screen dropped, it kind of just threw me off. All right. All right. So, be a friend to yourself for the next 24 hours. Make sure that you're saying this affirmation. I am not my inner critic. I am my healing. I validate myself. I trust I trust myself, and I'm more than enough. And then our intention for today is to practice self-love. It's to practice self-love. Okay. Listen, if this session change your perspective, change your perception on the inner critic. Listen, drop a fire in the chat for me. Drop a fire in the chat for me. Okay, continue to subscribe to those YouTube channels. Continue to invite a friend and to the Elevating Life Facebook group. And we know that knowledge won't change our life alone. Actions will. So, imagine having personalized guidance, real accountability, and a supportive community, you guys, that will help you apply what you've learned. So, join our community. It's $47 a month. You get the resources, the resource portal, you get those Thursday labs, and you get a community of individuals to support you. And you also get the replays of Project Life. All right. I love you. I will see you next week when we continue our conversation about how to shape your life. You guys, we're talking about purpose. We're going to talk about purpose. I'm excited for that conversation. I see you. Have a great weekend. I love you. I love you. Till later.